Hi, and thanks for joining me today. I'm Sandy Jakab. I'm Chief Compliance Officer for and Counsel to Finhaven Private Markets. We're Canada's first digital securities dealer and marketplace for private placements and secondary trading. Our platform is built on private permissioned DLT. Before we begin, you should know that the contents of this presentation are mine and mine alone. Nothing I say today will be compliance or legal advice for you and your fintech business. Instead, these are just my reflections, set against the times we're living in and my own experiences. You should also know that I'm generally a person who takes vaccinations, and I've had my first shot of AstraZeneca. I thought you should be forewarned because it's going to become obvious that I think vaccines are useful. Shall we begin? Let me tell you a story about me and vaccines. The chickenpox virus wasn't introduced in Canada until 1999. So that means I'm of a generation that didn't get it. Instead, I got chickenpox when I was 14 years old. At first, it seemed the disease was taking its normal course, but on day 2, the rash and little skin blisters disappeared. My mother took one look and said, the virus has gone back inside you and we need to be worried. She was right. On day 4, a raging fever overtook me that we couldn't control, so Mom drove me to the local hospital. From my arrival there until another 4 days later, I have only fragments of memory about what happened. I drifted in and out of a deep delirium while hospital staff fought to get the virus under control. Now, I'm sure my life was never in danger, but chickenpox can actually kill you. I'm sure also that this story sounds trivial, given the COVID-19 devastation that's been wreaked on planet Earth in the last year and a half. But I want to ask you this. Don't we all regret it when we don't prevent an outcome that was preventable? I'm sure there isn't a person among us who hasn't followed the development of COVID-19 vaccines. We've learned that there are 2 ways the vaccines have been developed. First, the traditional method of injecting an inactive or weakened virus into our bodies, which in turn triggers antibody production. The trick, of course, is to inject just enough to trigger that production without making us seriously ill. The second method is the new messenger or mRNA method. In this vaccine development technique, a harmless protein or part of a protein from the actual virus is injected into our bodies, and that in turn prompts our cells to teach themselves to make what we need to fight the virus. I feel a metaphor coming on. Can we vaccinate our fintech businesses against non-compliance disease? Well, let's consider first what the kinds of non-compliance disease might be. There are 3 main strains. First, there's checklist virus. In this variant, staff are so busy working on the long list of things they must do in order to stay compliant with the laws that they lose track of the big picture. And the big picture always is, are your customers protected? In dissociation virus, compliance staff's activities are quite separate and apart from business operations. Compliance is done to the business rather than with the business. And the third and worst form of non-compliance virus is culture of non-compliance virus. In this strain, leaders and managers don't feel or act responsible for regulatory compliance. Everyone else soon catches on that it's not really that important to the organization. This leaves compliance staff with ineffective tools and no remedies when flare-ups of the virus occur. Well, you say, what if I'm already living healthy as a business? What if I've got people who are responsible for policies and procedures and controls And all of that is occupying a lot of our business activity. That's kind of like following Canada's food guide and getting enough exercise and sleeping well. That should be enough, right? Well, some people actually decide not to get vaccines because they believe just that having the building blocks in place for good health are enough. But as you can see from this illustration, that doesn't guarantee that some viruses or strains of viruses won't breach our defenses. Confession time. Before I came to Finhaven Private Markets, I was a securities regulator for a long time. And what I observed is that businesses can have the building blocks of compliance in place and on paper look like they're doing everything right, but still experience significant non-compliance and investor or customer harm. Why? Well, I believe that businesses, like human beings, can benefit from vaccines that boost our immunity and provide us with extra protection against viruses. So what does a traditional vaccine look like in a fintech regulated business? Well, a traditional vaccine would mean that the business voluntarily exposed itself to reviews and testing, investigations of specific patterns or incidents of noncompliance, and regular internal and external audits to look at compliance effectiveness. Now, if you're doing all of these things, that should give you some protection against both the checklist and the dissociation viruses. Those viruses would not withstand a traditional vaccine. You might see that, in fact, there are some momentary lapses or that there are some weaknesses in your systems, but revealing them with the traditional vaccine would allow you to strengthen again and get right back up to full strength. It should also be effective against culture of noncompliance virus. It's hard for that virus strain to survive in the bombardment of reviews and examinations and tests that go on with a traditional vaccine. The leaders of the business are bound to get very tired very soon of hearing that the same things are being discovered again and again without being remedied. Let's consider what an mRNA virus might look like in a fintech regulated business. To consider this a little bit more thoroughly, we need to unpack the metaphor a bit more. mRNA viruses teach the cells in our body to make a harmless protein. You might remember that's part of the virus itself. So who are the cells in a business? Well, they're not our fintech products. They're you and me, the people hired to help the business realize its mission and vision. We are the ones who need to learn to make the protein that will defend us against non-compliance virus. And what is the protein exactly? Well, in our bodies, proteins are extremely complex, but always include essential elements like hormones and antibodies and enzymes. In a fintech business, the elements that we need in the protein are knowledge, commitment, and integration. And fintech offers unprecedented opportunities to embed the protein into the cells of our business so that this all becomes self-replicating and self-fulfilling. Knowledge. Warren Buffett once said, risk comes from not knowing what we're doing. I think he might be onto something here. And so at Finhaven Private Markets, we ensure that every person who onboards in our business begins to develop right away competence with our regulatory environment and the compliance outcomes we need to achieve. And we don't just provide that education and training to people who are working in the regulated business. We chose to provide that education and training to our technical people as well, so that they would develop some core competencies around our regulatory environment and our compliance outcomes. We could have chosen just to have the regulated business people do it, but we believe that our back-end developers and our Scrum Masters and our QA testers and everyone contributing to a FinTech product needs to understand what we're shooting for, or we won't be able to get there together. And that cross-training goes two ways. The compliance professional can't simply be a consultant to the project who stands outside the project. Instead, the compliance professional really needs to understand which people contribute what, where to find information about how a sprint or an entire project is progressing, and needs to be involved in the testing itself in order to understand whether or not compliance outcomes will be met. I'm proud to work for a company that understands this. Commitment. Jean-Paul Sartre once said that commitment is an act, not a word. And of course, Yoda taught many of us in Star Wars too that there is no try, there is only do. What I've discovered is that if every person in a business understands that we all have responsibility for both user experience and compliance outcomes, we'll end up with a better product and be more likely to be able to meet the myriad of laws that we must comply with. This can only happen if there's a live sense of responsibility in the business where every leader and every manager has the tools to identify compliance implications in every task that they do, in every activity they engage in. And everybody at the firm must be incentivized to work that way and not take shortcuts. For our tech developers, this means they are constantly in iterative conversations with compliance and user experience professionals to make sure their development designs and functionality testing are getting to the right place. I find as well that a culture of commitment requires the element of insistent but respectful challenge. And to make that a real thing, the leaders, again, must demonstrate that respectful but insistent challenge will lead to change when that's appropriate. With the greatest respect to Sartre, I believe that commitment is more than just an act. It's acting again and again and again. Integration. One of my favorite legends is that of John F. Kennedy touring NASA Space Headquarters in 1961 and coming on a janitor mopping the floors. "Why are you working so late?" John F. Kennedy asked. "Mr. President," he responded, "I'm helping to put a man on the moon." I still find this legend really inspiring because it tells us that integration is not just about connecting business processes, it's about and of human beings and connecting them. It's critical to the very life of any business. In an online business supported by DLT, compliance can't just be applied exclusively to business activity after the fact. We must build as many compliance controls as we can right into the technology. And so, for example, in our business, our technology detects and stops from proceeding any applicants for an account who are not qualified. It also runs an algorithm against an investment proposal and stops an investment that isn't suitable for an investor in all their circumstances. Our technology delivers red flags that are connected to worrisome answers so that when a compliance reviewer is looking at an account application, he can see right away where the worrisome answers are and give that further consideration. These are but a few examples of the compliance controls we've built right into the technology at Finhaven Private Markets. We continue to have iterative, cross-disciplinary conversations about building the optimal and compliant experience. So having considered the mRNA vaccine, let's commit to building herd immunity in our industry. Regulation for fintech financial services businesses and fintech supported money services business is really very new, both here in Canada and globally. But Fintech offers unprecedented opportunities to build preventative compliance controls into our business processes. As a nascent industry, we have an opportunity to earn trust rather than raise skepticism about who we are and what we're doing. Knowledge, commitment, and integration. Blockchain has the potential to change our world for the better. Let's make sure that we work in a way to ensure that that happens. Thanks for listening, and thanks very much to the hardworking volunteers at FFCON 2021 who brought us together.